Dr. Periq, am I saying that right?
You are.
Thank you. Do you know anybody who's against biomedical research?
I do not know anybody that's against biomedical research, but I know some.
That's like being against children, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against world peace, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against golden retrievers, isn't it?
There's some people that argue there.
Okay. Well, let's get that out of the way. I want to ask you about NIH. I love NIH. I think they do extraordinary work.
Yes, sir.
But isn't it a fact if NIH assigns way too much money for overhead, that money comes out of the basic research? Isn't that the case?
Hey folks, welcome back to Freedom Forge, the channel where we stand up for American values, common sense, and your hard-earned tax dollars. Today, we're diving into a Senate hearing that ought to have every taxpayer in this country sitting up and paying attention. We're talking about Senator John Kennedy taking the NIH and the biomedical research establishment to task. And let me tell you, he pulls no punches.
Senator, both those things are providing funds for research. And I agree with you that we need to make the administrative burden and the costs associated with it as low as possible, because we do want as much to go to
Well, why
research.
can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
Yeah. Senator, we have had a partnership that's been going on for 75 years in this country.
Yes, sir, but why can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
At this point, what that would do is actually turn institutions like the ones we've heard about here, it would actually make it to where they are laying off researchers and the support folks who are
Well, the
supporting
Gates
that work.
Foundation, when they make grants, they limit overhead to 10%, don't they?
They do, sir, but that is apples to oranges because they count different things
And
in
the
the
Roberts
overhead.
Woods Johnson Foundation limits overhead to 12%, don't they?
They do. Again, apples to oranges because they count different things.
Isn't it a fact that the universities that receive the most money from NIH also have the biggest endowments?
I haven't checked that, but it probably is true, Senator. And I agree with you. There are challenges that we need to work on.
Well, let's take Harvard. 69 cents out of every dollar from NIH given to Harvard goes to overhead.
No, sir, it's 69 cents out of every $1.69. It's on top of, it's not within.
Okay. Which is 1.6. Let me ask you about one of the worst abuses I've ever seen. It was at Stanford.
Yes, sir.
Stanford was spending 74% of grants from NIH on overhead. Remember that?
I do, although I was in high school at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't. and they audited Stanford.
Yes, sir.
You remember what they found?
They bought a sailboat.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money to pay the salaries of the employees at a Stanford-owned shopping center, didn't they?
I don't remember that part. No,
I do.
But yeah, okay.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money that was supposed to go to research, ladies and gentlemen, to renovate the president's home,
Yes, sir.
didn't they?
I believe so, Senator. Again.
And to renovate the vice provost's home, too, didn't they?
I believe you when you say that. Yes.
And they also charged, Stanford took NIH research money to help children and applied it to depreciation on a Stanford yacht, didn't they?
Yes, sir. Again, when I was in high school, sir.
Now, does NIH audit every year the way these grants are being spent?
They don't audit every year. There's a process for
So they
determining.
just trust the universities?
No, there's a negotiation that takes place between
Yes,
the NIH
sir, but if it's a
and the
five-year grant
Yes, sir.
and they agree on indirect costs, they don't audit it every year. What if the universities lie to them?
That is absolutely a possibility. There's
What does fungible mean?
Fungible means that you can move money from one place to another.
And money's fungible, isn't it?
Money is fungible.
I'm ready to have a productive discussion. I've got to go to another committee. Maybe you'll have it today. I haven't heard it.
Yes, sir.
What I've heard is the implication is that anybody who is against asking hard questions about the overhead and spending is against biomedical research.
I wouldn't say that, sir. I think you are a champion.
And I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either.
But every penny that we spend on overhead that's not being audited, and you know as much as I do, Doc, that some of it is being abused, is money that is taken away from research. And that's just a fact.
Senator,
And if you care about this child here, and I know you do, we all do, then any money spent illegitimately on overhead to pay the salary of a professor in the humanities department at a university is coming out of her research. And it's not wrong to ask questions.
it is not wrong to ask
No,
questions.
it's not.
Not at all. And Senator, I think it's actually important to ask those questions and optimize the system.
And I don't understand why these universities cannot live on 15% overhead when Gates Foundation limits them to 10% and the Johnson Foundation limits them to 12%. I don't understand it. All of a sudden, if they don't get 35% overhead, civilization is going to melt.
It is important.
My
to have
mama
that
didn't
conversation.
raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers.
You know, I love how Senator Kennedy starts off. Is anybody really against biomedical research? Of course not. That's like being against world peace or golden retrievers. Nobody is against life-saving research. But here's the thing, folks, just because we support the mission doesn't mean we should hand over a blank check. That's what this is really about. Accountability, transparency, and making sure our money is actually going to cures and breakthroughs, not yachts and home renovations. Here's where it gets wild. Senator Kennedy brings up the overhead. That's the administrative costs to keep the lights on money. Now, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, gets billions of our tax dollars every year. But how much of that actually goes to the science, to the test tubes, and the researchers? Turns out, a ton is eaten up by overhead. Kennedy asked straight up, why can't we cap this at 15%, like other private foundations do? The Gates Foundation caps at 10%. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation at 12%. But when Dr. Periq tries to explain it away, it's apples to oranges, she says, I have to call foul. Look, I get it. Maybe there are some differences. But don't tell me that universities can't live on what other world-class organizations do. The reality is they don't want to. It's much easier to spend someone else's money when you don't have to answer for it. And then, Stanford. Folks, you cannot make this stuff up. These are supposed to be the best and brightest, the pinnacle of American higher education. But what did they do with your NIH money? Kennedy lays it out. 74% of those grants, asterisk 3 out of every $4 asterisk, was spent on overhead. Not just paper and pencils, folks, but shopping center employees, renovating the president's mansion, even covering depreciation on a university yacht. A yacht. This is supposed to be money to help sick kids, to find cures for cancer. Instead, it's going to luxury perks for university elites. And you know what? The NIH doesn't even audit these grants every year. They just trust the universities. If that doesn't sound like a recipe for abuse, I don't know what does. Let's get real here. Every single penny that gets wasted on these administrative shenanigans is a penny not spent on actual research. That's less hope for families praying for breakthroughs. That's slower progress for American medicine. And when you ask questions, you get accused of being against science. That's nonsense. Real patriots ask tough questions. We demand accountability. That's what built this country. Now, some folks will say, oh, but if we cut overhead, civilization will melt down. Give me a break. Harvard, Stanford, these places have massive endowments. They've got more money than some small countries. If the Gates Foundation can do world-changing work with a 10% overhead cap, why can't these universities? And let's not forget, money is fungible. That means once it's in the pot, it can be moved around. That's how you get shopping center salaries and yachts being paid for with science grants. It's an insult to every American taxpayer And to every patient waiting for a cure, Senator Kennedy is right. Every dollar wasted is a dollar stolen from kids like this, from families counting on American ingenuity and hard work. We owe it to them to demand better. So folks, don't let anyone tell you that asking questions is anti-science. It's pro-accountability, pro-American, and pro-patient. We support biomedical research, but we insist on honesty and efficiency. That's what makes this country great. Thanks for tuning in to Patriot Watch. If you agree that it's time for real oversight and common sense in government spending, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Let's hold these elites accountable together. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.